Ciao, buongiorno. Scusate il ritardo, diciamo, come avrete probabilmente visto e experienced, c'era una lunga fila. Ho detto una roba in inglese, diciamo, di quelle che quando si fanno le discussioni su perché usate sempre dei termini in inglese invece che quelli in italiano, se ne trovano sempre certe. Come si traduce experienced nel momento in cui avete partecipato, mettiamo così, diciamo, avete partecipato di una lunga fila e questo, diciamo, ha un po' ritardato l'inizio di questo incontro e ce ne scusiamo. Grazie molte di essere venuti. Io sono Luca Sofri, secondo, diciamo, una formula che mi ripetono e di cui sono onorato, sono di casa e quindi faccio io le introduzioni di rito anche a nome di Internazionale di questo incontro. Dico sinteticamente, lo dico ogni anno, del mio ringraziamento e del mio essere onorato a questa festa di Internazionale, che è una cosa straordinaria, ma insomma, come tutti voi avete modo di percepire, sia che siate qua per la prima volta o che siate venuti anche gli altri anni. Oggi qui parliamo con Michael Anti e Evgeny Morozov di un tema molto interessante e molto importante, su cui, come al solito, Internazionale è un po' più avanti del dibattito consueto sugli altri media italiani. I media italiani, in realtà anche in altri posti del mondo, ma i media italiani ancora semplificano moltissimo le cose che riguardano la rete e internet, in sostanza rimbalzando un po' schizofrenicamente fra due posizioni diverse, una celebrazione, diciamo, della grandezza, della rivoluzione della rete e di tutto il bene che ci porta, oppure dell'attribuzione di questa posizione a un presunto misterioso popolo della rete che omogeneamente, diciamo, avrebbe delle posizioni totalmente entusiaste nei confronti di qualunque cosa succeda su internet, oppure per contro una preoccupata e allarmistica e terroristica posizione di tutti i disastri, diciamo, che la rete può procurare, e tutti i pericoli e tutte le cose che peggiorano e tutto il male che viene dalla rete, eccetera, eccetera. Naturalmente, come in tutte le cose, diciamo, le cose sono molto più complesse, però, diciamo, bisogna un po' frequentare i dibattiti in rete per sapere che la loro complessità è discussa, trattata e ormai è in uno, diciamo, stadio avanzato di elaborazione in molti altri ambiti, diciamo, che approfondiscono un po' di più. Tra i protagonisti di questi approfondimenti e anche, diciamo, protagonisti in prima persona con le loro esperienze, soprattutto nel caso di Michael Anti, ci sono Michael Anti e Evgeny Morozov. Evgeny ha scritto un libro che si chiama The Net Delusion, il sottotitolo è Dark Side of the Internet. Io prima ho incautamente detto casualmente Dark Side of the Internet, con lui è una di quelle espressioni che usano i giornali per allarmare rispetto alla rete. Lui mi ha ricordato che è il sottotitolo del suo libro. Però, diciamo, al di là della semplificazione, Evgeny, adesso semplifico un po' io, ma è una persona molto competente. Lui è bielorusso, poi ha studiato in diversi posti d'Europa, adesso vive in California, dove insegna. È una persona di grandissima competenza, esperienza e attenzione alle cose della rete, che è stato protagonista di discussioni e posizioni molto interessanti negli ultimi anni, con, semplifico, una specie di scetticismo rispetto a degli eccessi di sopravvalutazione del ruolo e della funzione positiva della rete in certi confronti politici nel mondo, sia nelle cosiddette rivoluzioni di Facebook nordafricane, sia in altri casi dove appunto la rete diventa invece uno strumento di controllo da parte del potere. Michael Anti è cinese, vive in Cina a Pechino, fa il giornalista, ha collaborato con dei giornali americani, adesso è columnist e collabora con dei giornali cinesi, occupandosi soprattutto della rete, conoscendo moltissimo, diciamo, la situazione di Internet in Cina, che come sapete è una situazione molto particolare, molto complessa e anche molto difficile da afferrare da fuori. E quindi appunto con loro proviamo a fare questa conversazione e approfondimento sulle sfaccettature dell'uso della rete, diciamo, nelle questioni politiche internazionali da parte sia dei poteri, che delle ribellioni ai poteri, che delle dissidenze nei confronti dei poteri. Io appunto entrerei un po' nelle questioni, cominciando con Michael e chiedendogli di provare a descriverci, diciamo, con un po' di sintesi, al di là di quello che tutti sappiamo sulla grande censura del regime, le grandi muraglie e i social network locali, ma insomma, di provare a spiegarci un pochino più articolatamente di qual è in questo momento il ruolo della rete in Cina rispetto ai temi, diciamo, che ho abbozzato qui.
From Beijing. So it's very exciting to be invited here. And in this weekend, so it's amazing to see so many young people to come here, not for movie, but for talking about censorship. So it's amazing. And Chinese situations about internet and its censorship is very complicated. So I partly support Evgeny's theory about internet delusion. So I called it internet fantasy. But I'm a little bit in between his position and real fantasy. First, very important things. Chinese, I want to describe China's internet as a very simple way. I will say, first, every Web 2.0 services, including Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google partly, and every Web 2.0 service you can imagine is officially blocked or partly blocked inside China. But Chinese always have their copycat version of every Web 2.0 services. Like you have YouTube, we have Youku, you have Google, we have Baidu, you have Twitter, we have Weibo, you have, whatever you have. Well, we're just a perfect copycat, a Chinese version. So, but after we copycat the Chinese version, now it's officially blocked international version. So internet are divided into China's net and also the free internet. But if you say that China, because of censorship, and so copycat, so the Chinese netizen internet society is not large, that is not true. Because China also have the most population of netizen in the world. And up till now, we have 500 million netizens, internet users in China. We have the Chinese web and microblogging services, the Chinese Twitter, or copycat, we call it Weibo. Microbloggers in China, we have 200 million microbloggers, the everyday tweeting. So even China is an intranet. But given the numbers of the users, they use the China net, it's still an internet. Even we blocked international Web 2.0 services. Even we set self-censorship in the Chinese website. Still, given the number of the size, it still creates a very vivid dynamic of the internet usage. I give example. We talk about the Twitter revolution, Facebook revolution in Arab Spring, right? But always some foreigners ask, is there any possibility in China there will be some kind of Chinese Arab Spring or Jasmine revolution in China? But so what is like like the Chinese microblogging, if we have the 200 million microbloggers, it will lead to the Chinese democracy? So these questions always asked when in the past several months. But I want to clarify one important thing. When Tunisia, we call Tunisia revolution, we always say the Facebook revolution because Facebook was not blocked before the revolution. So the protesters used the Facebook to meet up, to plan some protests. So eventually lead to the revolution. But I will remind you, the server of the Facebook is based in California, in the United States. So basically, if we say which revolution, most important answer to this question, another question to this, the first question is, where the server is based in? Where is the server? If the server is based in United States, yes. It is not blocked inside Tunisia, yes. Maybe Facebook can trigger some kind of revolution for Tunisia. But if the authority of Tunisia kept the server in the capital of Tunisia, I don't think this revolution will happen. That's just the thing happened in China. Every Chinese domestic microblogging services, the server is based in Beijing. That means the authorities, along with the company, can control the data and the social mapping of all the dissidents and the civil connections of the civil society. That means you keep everything to be seen by the government. So even before you have the idea to meet up, to have some plot of a revolution, they can even calculate you have the tendency to have a revolution. Because if you follow more sensitive guy than others, the index of a political sensitivity will be higher than the common netizens. They will identify as your risky guys. They will limit the numbers you can tweet, you can retweet, even mute or delete your tweets. This is I call it control 2.0 or censorship 2.0. It is data mining of censorship. So even they can calculate, predict, you can do something in the future. So that's the thing happened in China. When we decentralize content, but with the server centralized in the capital of authoritarian countries. It's not a very simplified way to describe the internet as a free platform. Sometimes a little mixture with 1984. But even though we have 200 million microbloggers, even though the censorship we have, this really can change the mindset of the people. Chinese people now more and more accept freedom of speech and participatory democracy as their born rights. It's not like American democracy, or we never say now that it's American freedom of speech. No, it's our freedom of speech. I think thanks to microblogging, thanks to internet, Chinese now have their first in the history national platform for debating about politics. It is new starting. So I partly agree Evgeny's theory about a revolution can't be treated. But also I want to say, in the country, China, we had before almost nothing about civil connection and civil society. Now internet, even we can't say it is revolution can trigger revolution, but it is revolutionary for Chinese.
Diciamo già introdotto e accennato e si è riferito alle cose che Evgeny dice e scrive, quindi adesso lasciamo che Evgeny spieghi quali sono le cose che dice e scrive, io gli darei diciamo anche un input particolare di spiegarci qual è stata la sua critica e perché alle definizioni di Twitter Revolution e Facebook Revolution per le rivoluzioni nordafricane.
Sure. I'm extremely pleased to be here, not least because Internazionale was actually one of the first international publications that found my work 4 years ago. So 4 years ago, you already had some of my articles here in Italy, while there was still very little interest in what I had to say in America and elsewhere. So in that, I have to congratulate you for being on the cutting edge. You, Luke, I think, fell into my trap when I made that joke about my subtitle, because the actual subtitle of the American edition of the book is The Dark Side of Internet Freedom. It's not the dark side of the internet. And let me just unpack what exactly I have in mind. And I think I'll reference you to the British subtitle of the book, which is a much better expose of what I'm actually saying. And that subtitle is How Not to Liberate the World. And if you read that message carefully, you'll understand that my primary interest is not so much in trying to bash the internet or show that it's an evil force that's taking over society and destroying our brains and culture. I have no interest at all in being lumped with this cultural conservative camp of people like Nicholas Carr, Andrew Kino, Jaron Lanier. I have very little interest in that. My interest comes primarily on this issue from thinking about questions like the future of democracy in authoritarian states, the future of democracy promotion, the future of having West and Western countries support things like freedom of expression and human rights. And here we have a very long and spotty history in the West, with being taken with a lot of silly ideas, which sound good in theory, but in practice, they actually only make things worse. And here you can cite all sorts of examples where good intentions on behalf of Western politicians or policymakers are simply not enough, and left to their own devices actually undermine the existing situation and make it worse for democracy. So when I think about the excitement that new media, blogs, tweets, the internet have generated, and you rightly point out that the media tends to overestimate its potential to democratization and underestimate its more repressive features, surveillance, propaganda, censorship. It's not only that the media produces bad reportage and that, they don't dig deep enough. The problem is that the policymakers actually read those stories and make very bad policy. So what I was trying to do with the book was to try to deepen the debate about ways in which the internet is changing authoritarian states, but also, and perhaps more importantly, what we in the West can do about the web and what we should do. How should the priorities be changed? Look, in the book, I accept very frankly that the internet matters, that it's a very important force that we need to grapple with. But there are different ways of approaching this issue. There are opportunity costs. You can think that all we need to do is just to pour money into training bloggers, and we need to train activists in how to use Facebook and Twitter, and then expect that they will arise the way they did in Tunisia and Egypt. That's one way, and that's the way that has so far been consistently advocated by the American government. That lies at the core of what I call the internet freedom agenda. You had Hillary Clinton over the last 2 years deliver several high-profile speeches where she articulated what the United States government will be doing with regards to internet freedom. And what I've been doing is trying to show that they're not committed enough to do the difficult things, and they're only going for the low-hanging fruit. So in a sense, yes, it's nice to be training bloggers and activists in the Middle East and Asia and elsewhere, but what really needs to happen is for the American government and many Western European governments to start exerting pressure, for example, on their own technology companies who arm authoritarian regimes with technology that they use to spy on their own netizens. Who built the technology and the infrastructure and the surveillance infrastructure for Gaddafi's regime? Those were companies from Germany, France, maybe Italy. Who built the same infrastructure for Mubarak? It was also European companies. It was American companies. Why all of that is happening, and why don't we hear any criticism from our own politicians. Instead, what we hear is them celebrating the role of the Arab Spring and the role of social media and the role of the young people. There is very little debate about ways in which such technology empowers the dictators. And all I'm saying is that we have to be very careful not to get carried away with celebrating the transformative role of the internet while we have so many issues to solve. And we also have to understand that the internet is a global space. And the usefulness of the internet to dissidents in Iran or Belarus or China partly depends on domestic policy decisions that will be taken in the West. So domestic internet policy about copyright law, about cybercrime, about privacy, all of those issues, when we think of them as purely domestic issues, you think about America and you think that, hey, net neutrality has nothing to do whatsoever with the fate of dissidents in China or Belarus or Iran. And that's not the right way to look at it. Because net neutrality, if it falls, if that idea basically loses to the idea of an internet where companies can discriminate based on the content of the traffic, if they can look inside and see whether they're watching a movie or whether they're reading a newspaper, if that agenda wins, what will happen is that we will see even more tools for surveillance being developed. Because ISPs and internet service providers and internet companies will need to build technology to scrutinize the content that flows through the networks, right? So there is a very direct connection between domestic internet debate on the one hand and the implications of the internet for foreign policy debate. That link, no one makes it in America. You know, you hear the same senators who would go on and on and on celebrating the role of Twitter and Facebook and the internet and their contribution to the Arab Spring, but at the same time, they wouldn't want to uphold the net neutrality agenda, or they would want to fight cyber war, cybercrime, by removing anonymity from the internet. And those two agendas are incompatible. And all I want to do is to make it extremely hard for them to talk in that language, because I think that language allows precisely the proliferation of surveillance technology and all sorts of other solutions, cyber attacks, technology for waging cyber attacks in bulk, very cheap. All of that needs to stop. And the only way to stop it is for us to regain some sobriety in thinking about technology and thinking about its political impact. We wouldn't get very far if all we do is just celebrating the bright side and how great it was that Twitter and Facebook played some role in the Arab Spring. And I can leave it here. We can go into the Arab Spring itself, but that's sort of the short summary.
Ma spieghiamo a Evgeny com'è il dibattito politico italiano sulla rete, diciamo. E a proposito di quello che diceva Evgeny sul ruolo delle corporation e di costruttori delle infrastrutture e dei gestori di tutto questo nuovo accesso alla comunicazione appunto in paesi dove manca la democrazia, volevo chiedere a Michael di raccontarci la sua esperienza e la sua valutazione rispetto alle questioni che ci sono state in Cina sulle scelte fatte da Google, sulle scelte fatte da Microsoft. Nel suo caso lui ha avuto, diciamo, un conflitto personale con Facebook rispetto a un suo account su Facebook.
I think I'm a very convenient target for the American internet companies. In 2005, December, my blog was removed by Microsoft because they set up a Chinese joint venture in Shanghai, and then under pressure, they removed my political blog. And also this February, Facebook deleted my account. This almost the only one case in mainland China. They said I didn't use the real name. They want to show. I show them my Harvard certificate with Michael Anti. They said it's not enough. You should see your ID card name. I think, oh my God. So he wrote letter. I complained. They wrote letter back to me. Even Lady Gaga, if she has a Facebook profile page, she should use the real name. Nobody. I don't think anybody here. Yeah. So Lady, okay, that satisfies me. Yeah. So I'm a very convenient the target, but in China, I think that China is not only a totalitarian country, but also a very big market. The market is served because we have the 500 million internet users. It's really like a meat for the companies. So a lot of companies like Microsoft, Google, they go to China, but a lot of stuff, for example, the Twitter, Facebook, they still now have the access to China. But you know, when the Microsoft in 2005, they removed my blog. But years after Microsoft removed my blog, their Chinese joint venture was sold to Sina.com, the Chinese company, because they eventually find they can earn no money to have some Chinese joint venture in China. And also, they have a decision, Google has the similar decision about pull out from China. I think this decision made by two reasons. First, the privacy is very important because there's a report come out, Chinese hackers already hacked the servers of the headquarters of Google. They think it's a threat to their digital empire dream. So they just pull out from China, so they continue their dream without the Chinese intervention. But also the reason come out, the market share, because the Baidu, with the help of the Chinese government, dominate the domestic searching market. Basically, if Google still keep partly the Chinese server inside China, I don't think Google can earn any money. I mean, of course, they earn money, but not seriously compared to the global share. So now, up to now, we can have a conclusion. If an internet company really want to have money in China, it's impossible. Because, as I mentioned, Chinese authority, so very important for them to keep any social media, any Web 2.0 service internet company outside China and keep their Chinese version copycat, keep the server based in Beijing. It's crucial for the Chinese authoritarian the government. It's not about business. It's about politics. So politically, it is impossible for an international company to do business very well in China, even you accept some censorship. Because Google and Microsoft just tell you, before I accept that, but comes out, I benefit nothing from this compromise. So why not just like Google pull out China? Like Twitter never enter China. Facebook, yeah, I think partly they remove my account is because the first step to go. But I don't think even Facebook have a Chinese server inside China. It can earn other money. No. Eventually, Chinese copycat company will overcome you in the domestic market share. That's my first position about internet. Before we always into the company. Before we always said compromise is about moral. But now I will say, in now the Chinese political situation, it's not only about moral standard. It's also about market share. You can't earn money in China, even you compromise. So why? Why not just stick to your value? Because the cost, nothing, right? Second very important things, when we seek for the internet company, because we think government is bad, not only Chinese government, but also Italy government, but also United States government. All the government is necessary bad, right? But the point is, if we think the government is Mr. Jones, so we are seeking for some kind of internet company like Google and Facebook as a new savior. I think they are pigs. But what's the result? As the animal farm, the pigs eventually won't have their own version of Miss Jones' picture. Sometimes they even have they eat together. Why? Because I want to mention the real name policy. That's the reason Facebook removed my account. This is also the practice that Google Plus are doing. There is only in the planet, there is only one practical examples of real name internet policy is South Korean government. They practice that for 4 years. They just stopped 2 months ago. Why? The reason they set up the real name policy, they thought that this new real name policy can force every netizen to show your citizenship on the internet, not to, too many bad things happened because many actors suicide because of rumor at that time. So they wanted to set up this real name policy. They did, the first time in the planet. But why they stopped that? Because now 95% of South Korean netizen data, including your blood type, already cracked, become open database on the internet. You can search about 95% of every 95% and 75 totally the citizenship of the citizens of the South Korea. Because if internet's real name policy, it is also very easy to combine your real data, including your blood type and your address, telephone number, credit card number, with the internet account. It's easy to let the hacker to get. Because of these kind of privacy reasons, the South Korean government stopped this practice. But now Facebook and Google want to expand this kind of power from the digital empire to the ground empire. South Korea government want to expand their power to the internet. But now Facebook and Google want to expand the power to the ground. I think it's very dangerous. For example, in the totalitarian countries, if you bound the internet account with the real identities, it is almost like you give every data to the police to crack down any possible protests or even meetup. It's even more danger than the Chinese now practical self-censored micro-blogging services. But if Google won't still do that, I would say that remember the story of Animal Farm. Pigs said, we are equal, but someone is more equal than others. Eventually, pigs eat with Miss Jones. If individuals and civil societies not work together to protest against the censorship and power expansion across the border, not only on the ground, but also on the internet, eventually our pigs will have dinner with the Mr. Jones.
Evgeny, su questo tema dell'anonimato in rete, su cui appunto ci sono molti fortissimi argomenti sul mantenimento della libertà dell'anonimato in rete, quelli che riguardano naturalmente i paesi, i regimi autoritari che rischiano di avere più strumenti di controllo, quelli che riguardano la privacy, appunto sollevati adesso da Michael con la storia della Corea del Sud, che non è un regime autoritario, ma appunto anche lì hanno trovato un argomento molto valido e molto importante. Invece mi chiedo appunto se l'argomento usato da alcuni in buona fede, perché poi naturalmente sono tutti quelli in cattiva fede che sono diciamo una parte cospicua, l'argomento usato da alcuni in buona fede sull'uso dei nomi reali in rete, nel senso di diciamo assunzione di responsabilità da parte di chi fa le cose in rete, con conseguente diciamo ipotetica, tutta a verificare, ma crescita della qualità dei contenuti in rete, eccetera, eccetera, non possa avere una sua validità nei paesi democratici dell'Occidente, cioè se il discorso che ha fatto Michael valga anche per i paesi dell'Occidente.
I think it definitely does. I mean, look, here the relationship you're looking at is that between dissent on the one hand and anonymity and being able to speak your mind freely on the other. And it doesn't matter whether you are in a fully democratic or fully authoritarian society. I mean, yes, the risks of you being persecuted for what you say are probably lower in a democratic society, all things being equal. But even here, you can think of plenty of examples where your animus would not necessarily be the state agents, but all sorts of extremist and radical non-state groups that will perform the vigilante role and then just persecute you for whatever it is you have to say, or simply for who you are. So from that perspective, I think it is very important to maintain the ability to speak your mind freely on as many online platforms as possible. The problem here, and I think Michael was partly alluding to this, is that there is some kind of internal logic to how the web today develops. And that logic, as you well know now, includes moves towards disclosing more and more information about who we are to internet companies. And in a sense, you can think about privacy being the new currency of the web. In a sense, Google or Facebook or Twitter are not free. I mean, you have to pay for them, but you don't pay for them with money. You pay for them with your own information about who you are, what you like, and what you do. And the companies accept that currency, hoping that they would be able to convert it to money through advertising. So the reason why Facebook and Google want to have real name policy is not because they are at heart bastards and evil guys who basically don't like dissidents like Michael. No, they do it only because they hope that by having as many people use their real names as possible, they would be able to sell advertising of the best quality. They don't want to dilute their user base with fake entries and fake accounts and fake names. So their logic here is purely commercial. The big question is, what do we want to change? Do we want the governments to really step in and tell to Google and Facebook that, look, guys, we don't want you to do that? And I mean, it's an argument about which we can have a debate. It's never going to happen because the governments themselves don't want users to be anonymous. So there is a very uncanny alliance between the agenda of the state, which wants to destroy anonymity, regardless of whether we're talking about democracies or autocracies, and on the other hand, the business logic of corporations that don't want anonymity for their own corporate reasons. And here the question is, so who will speak up on behalf of the internet users? And it's a big question. And the only people who can speak up on behalf of the internet users will be idealistically minded people working for governments. And there are some of those who may oppose the draconian agenda of law enforcement agencies. I do believe that even if you look at, say, America, there are very smart, noble, and idealistic people, even at the State Department, who genuinely believe in human rights and who genuinely believe in advancing the ability to express yourself freely. And it may be through them that there will be some kind of resistance. But there is none at all at the moment. And that's what puzzles me so much about this internet freedom agenda, where we're not really talking about issues that matter. I mean, it's nice to give credit to social media for the Arab Spring, but there are so many more challenges ahead, and we need to start talking about it. And the second option, of course, is to expect that change will come through civil society, that we need to politicize these issues, that we need to turn questions of online anonymity, privacy, piracy, and many other things into far more political issues. And partly, I think, the success of the Pirate Party in recent elections in Germany suggests that these issues are slowly being turned into political matters. And yes, we should expect that the kind of internet freedom agenda that is popular with the pirate parties all over Europe now is slowly replacing the green agenda. And I think it's an issue that resonates with the younger crowds. But again, there needs to be more systematic thinking about these issues from the perspective of civil society. As much, and we probably disagree here with Michael, I do believe in regulation. I think that governments should step in and regulate those companies on many issues. Anonymity is not one of those issues. It's never going to happen. There is simply no rational justification for companies to comply with it from a legal perspective. It will be very hard to put it in law. It doesn't mean that you cannot put other sorts of pressure on them. You know, and that's what happens with us exerting pressure on them when companies hire underage workers in sweatshops, right? We have means by which we can pressure those companies. And the big issue now is how able we would be in mobilizing public support for many of these issues, because, you know, and here I may be the ultimate pessimist, but the only change that is possible right now is change that will come from civil society itself. It will come from NGOs, it will come from bloggers like Michael, it will come from activists. It would be great if we can mobilize sympathetic governments, or at least to have allies within individual governments to help advance that agenda, but that will be hard. But at the same time, I don't want the governments to just run away from this issue altogether and then just say, look, we give up and it's all up to civil society. No, I want people who claim to be active supporters of internet freedom to actually support it, not just issue empty proclamations and take the credit for what they haven't actually done.
Volevo approfittare, diciamo, del fatto che Evgeny comunque ha vissuto, diciamo, 17 anni in Bielorussia, quello del suo paese, per farci raccontare, quello è un altro posto dove c'è un problema di democrazia, ecco, per farci raccontare se c'è anche lì un ruolo della rete in entrambi i sensi, sia dal punto di vista del mantenimento dell'autorità, sia dal punto di vista delle chance potenziali di, appunto, crescita invece della democrazia.
So originally, I would say that the impulse for me to write this book has come from partly experiences in Belarus, where I saw the internet play a rather marginal role in helping to counter the government. So a lot of my negative or pessimistic thinking about the internet does originate in its failure to do much in the context of that particular country. And I'll give you some reasons why I think it hasn't. I'll give you some reasons for sort of thinking that there is a darker side to it, and then we can debate how strong the dark side is. There are several problems that I see. First of all, it's the fragmentation of opposition. In a sense, you have a lot of young people who, after 15 years of presidential rule, are very unhappy with the opposition itself. They haven't seen it deliver on anything, and they think that the opposition as a political structure is more or less that. And even those who oppose the government do not necessarily want to join the opposition. And instead, what they hope is that they would be able to pull off some kind of a virtual revolt, and they would be happy, and they would be able to use Facebook and Twitter to publicize their activities, and they would be able, in a decentralized, uncoordinated manner, to oppose the government. Now, looking at the political situation in Belarus, I see no way of that happening. I don't see a decentralized, use-based movement right now emerge out of nowhere. And Facebook and Twitter, as good as they are not enough to glue that movement together. So for me, the fear is that a lot of young people who could have otherwise been working in the opposition, advancing its causes, regardless of how ineffective and bad and corrupted much of the opposition is. And I agree with many of the criticisms. My fear is that instead of trying to recruit them into this mainstream political institutions, which from my perspective are the only vehicle for change in a country like Belarus, instead of doing that, they are spending time on blogs and Facebook pages, you know, drawing funny mustaches on the photos of the president, thinking that it somehow constitutes dissent, and being quite content with their positional struggle. You know, it makes them feel good, and it doesn't require much effort. And this is what puzzles me so much, and it worries me a lot, because in a sense, the people who could have been productively working for that opposition movement, which is extremely ineffective, are not working for the opposition movement. And that may explain why it's actually so ineffective, right? So this is one level of criticism that, you know, I have. The other is that you have to understand that governments, and here you have to understand that there is a wide diversity across authoritarian governments. You know, it's very hard. Often, you know, in the media you will get countries like Syria and Singapore lumped together as being sort of quasi-authoritarian, and there is as much difference across them as across them and democracies. You have to understand that the political dynamics and cultural dynamics in authoritarian states differ. So Syria is not the same as Belarus, and China is not the same as Egypt, and Iran is not the same as Russia. They all have different regimes with different capabilities, strategies, and ability to deal with the internet. And clearly in some regimes, you have governments that are technology savvy, and they're eager to survive. And based on that, they have a very active counter-strategy that aims to neutralize the liberating impact of the internet and somehow amplify its more repressive impact. That's why in Egypt, which I think was not particularly creative under Mubarak in controlling the internet, we didn't see a local alternative to Facebook, a local alternative to YouTube, or a local alternative to Twitter. You know, the Mubarak government basically disregarded them. They had very little censorship, and what happened is that, of course, the Egyptian young people set up accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, which were completely out of reach for the Egyptian government. That didn't happen in China, as Michael has pointed out, where the government and the companies had, I think, a very early alliance, and they very strategically managed to grab the entire Chinese internet market for themselves. And what's the difference? The difference is that when the Egyptian government wants to shut down Facebook, they cannot just call Mark Zuckerberg and ask him to remove a post or shut it down, right? They have to either shut down the internet or do nothing. In the Chinese case, all you need to do is a phone call from someone in Politburo, and the page will be gone immediately. Why? Because they're in China, and they are ultimately dependent on the Chinese government. So you have to understand that some countries and some governments and some dictators are obviously smarter about the web than others. And I would put Russia in the same category as China. And Michael, having been fighting them for decades, probably thinks that they're dumb still. And, you know, probably they are, but they're still smarter than some other dictators. That's what I'm putting out. So in the case of Belarus, you have a very mixed strategy. On the one hand, you have the government that has early on understood that social networks are by default very public platforms. So people disclose a lot of information about their connections, about their acts, about their planned meetings. And of course, the government and the KGB, which is still called KGB in Belarus, they all read those messages, and they show up on the protest square way before the protesters do, and then arrest everyone. Right? I mean, it's very easy to do with social media in a sense. It's all there. It's easy to data mine. It's very easy to organize it, see it, and then act on it, and do a lot of preemptive kind of planning. All of that is happening. The question is whether the kind of activities that are being planned and discussed online will one day overwhelm the preemptive apparatus of the government. And here, you know, it's hard to say. If there is some real world turmoil, as was the case in Tunisia, and the government is distracted, and the government has to fight many other things at the same time, yes, it's possible that it will overwhelm the capacity of the government to cope with it. But you have to understand that this internal turmoil, in vast majority of the cases, is generated externally from the internet. It doesn't come from too many tweets or too many Facebook posts. It comes from a real political or economic crisis. So in a sense, yes, the internet can be extremely useful to the opposition once there is, to use, you know, the Marxist term, a revolutionary situation. If there is no revolutionary situation, its contribution is either limited or double-sided, with the government being able to act preemptively, arrest everyone, and deal with this issue altogether. So in Belarus, I think the situation right now is that as long as there is no credible, interesting, exciting opposition, and as long as the young people are more or less distracted from participating in politics by thinking that they can just participate in virtual protest, there is no chance of such a situation occurring. There are ways in which you can trigger it through economic crisis, which is ongoing, through maybe, you know, ecological disasters may happen. Who knows what may happen, right? But in the absence of those situations, I think the government has more or less figured out how to control the internet. One very tiny example, and I'll finish here, just to show you how bad the situation is. So there were elections in December 2010, last year. And what happened was that a lot of people, of course, showed up to, and of course the elections were rigged. I mean, it's obvious, doesn't need even to be said. But once the elections were announced, of course, people gathered in the main public square in Minsk to protest. And what happened is that, of course, being the technology-friendly people that we expect modern protesters to be, they all carried mobile phones. But what happened is that after, of course, the government arrested hundreds of people and very successfully quashed the uprising, the government managed to just turn to operators of mobile networks and ask them who were the people who gathered in the square. And it's very easy to figure out because your mobile phone has to connect to mobile towers. So the mobile operators can actually, with great precision, to give the names of all thousands of people who showed up during a particular protest in a particular venue. And if you think about the implications of this, I mean, one implication is easy. You just leave your mobile phone at home, right? But if that's the implication, then the liberating power of technology is essentially nullified. And we have to go back and just think about ways in which we can either build mobile phones that hide your location or find ways to pressure mobile operators not to cooperate with the government.
Come diceva Evgeny, diciamo, i paesi sono tutti diversi e ancora di più sono diversi, diciamo, quando invece sono delle democrazie come il nostro e delle democrazie compiute. Però è impressionante quanto le cose che diceva Evgeny rispetto alla Bielorussia assomiglino, diciamo, a una discussione, a delle riflessioni circolanti, soprattutto in rete, sulla situazione italiana, no? A proposito della mancanza di alternativa che non crea impegno e progetto politico concreto serio da parte di molte persone ben intenzionate e desiderose di cambiare le cose, che quindi, diciamo, sfogano tutto questo in rete e con una crescita e riproduzione addirittura fino all'inflazione rutinaria di manifestazioni pubbliche in rete e appelli in rete e giri di raccolte di firme in rete e post-it e via discorrendo, che poi alla fine si rivelano, diciamo, piuttosto sterili, salvo l'efficacia naturalmente del confortare e dare alle persone il senso di stare facendo qualcosa, che è molto importante, e però appunto rischiano forse addirittura di essere controproducenti nel momento in cui assorbono energie, diciamo, che in altri tempi, in altri contesti vengono applicate, diciamo, alla creazione di progetti e impegni più concreti. Poi tutto questo ha molto anche a che fare con le nostre vite e col tempo che abbiamo a disposizione. Noi ieri sul Post abbiamo discusso un tema che ci sembrava molto interessante sulle possibilità della manifestazione di Wall Street di questi giorni. Sapete che ormai da 2 settimane c'è un gruppetto di persone che sono accampate intorno al centro finanziario di Manhattan cercando di replicare quel modello che ha avuto, diciamo, grande successo nei paesi nordafricani di lunga occupazione di una piazza. Piccoli successi e risultati, però insomma hanno funzionato in posti come la Spagna e Israele, risultati più fallimentari in tentativi di altre imitazioni in altri paesi. Ma la cosa molto interessante per noi appunto sul caso Wall Street è che lì ci sono poche persone piuttosto scalcagnate che non se le fila nessuno, i giornali hanno gran voglia di dire la rivoluzione a Wall Street, ma vanno lì e vedono che sono un centinaio di persone e quindi, diciamo, manca la forza della rivoluzione. A un certo punto ne hanno menati un po' e quello ha dato il gancio, diciamo, per fare la notizia, poi è passata Susan Sarandon e quello di nuovo ha fatto risvegliare un attimo l'attenzione, però insomma manca la forza vera della rivoluzione. Però la cosa interessante è che appunto quelle persone lì hanno deciso di mettersi lì e dedicare tutte se stesse a quell'iniziativa di protesta popolare, che è una cosa che ormai nei paesi occidentali è difficilissimo fare, no? Qualcuno ha intervistato 2 giorni fa una delle persone che sono lì e gli ha detto: quanto pensate di stare? A oltranza, ha detto lui. Allora, noi abbiamo fatto una riflessione sul fatto che quell'atteggiamento lì, poi può darsi che si spenga, non vada da nessuna parte probabilmente quella manifestazione lì, ma quell'atteggiamento lì di essere ancora in grado nei paesi dell'Occidente di mettere a disposizione tutto se stessi, e significa le proprie vite, il proprio impegno, il proprio tempo, eccetera, su scadenze più lunghe che non domani mi sono preso mezzogiorno libero per andare a partecipare un attimo in piazza a una manifestazione e poi torno perché ho da fare un sacco di altre cose e spero che però così cada il governo Berlusconi. Diciamo, quella cosa lì è l'unica e probabilmente non più replicabile, diciamo, l'unica cosa che può ancora, diciamo, dare forza, come dimostrano naturalmente le cose successe nei paesi nordafricani, a dei movimenti e dare risultati ai movimenti di iniziativa popolare, e che forse però appunto non si può più costruire, diciamo, nei sistemi come il nostro, che poi magari è anche un bene perché significa che viviamo in condizioni di privilegio, però diciamo, il tema è molto interessante. Io ero curioso di sapere da tutti e due, passando a un'altra storia puntuale, in particolare da Michael, ma anche da Evgeny, in particolare da Michael perché diciamo, lui è stato personalmente coinvolto nella questione, come si pone tutta la storia, la questione di Wikileaks nella discussione che abbiamo fatto.
Wikileaks is an attempt to have a situation of anarchy in the internet age, in the internet digital world. It's really anarchy. The Assange didn't trust any government, so they think we rule ourselves. A similar theory is about anarchy in China. We practice is communists, right? Communists, at the very beginning, they had the compromise, have the idea, promise of the people. Every individual is free, so eventually we will get everything we want to get. But it turns out it's more theory control even than the capitalists. So in this way, I think anarchy itself, maybe it's the very beginning, it is a promise of freedom, but because of lack of practice, lack of really ground building of the structure, it will be eventually turned out as a more control. In the terms of WikiLeaks, in China, I think the story WikiLeaks already disclosed to the Chinese about the rumors and about everything. It didn't disclose very important things. I don't think it's disclosed a very important thing. But after the data make public, make open for without any hiding the names. Now in China, the most debate is about the betrayer. That means the intellectuals and professors, journalists, activists who spoke to the embassies, now become some kind of a informant and betrayer. So this is the discussion between the nationalists and with liberals. Who is the betrayer? So it turns out WikiLeaks in China didn't bring a bright side story, but most of the story will be the negative. And we don't know the future because some WikiLeaks story is very sensitive inside China. The people who tell the story to the embassies about the stories of princelings about the president may have the risk of the death penalty. That means for Chinese, WikiLeaks is not, general to say, is not a good thing. So it's my Chinese friends' feelings about WikiLeaks. It's not as some other countries think it's a brighter story, but for Chinese, it didn't have the positive way of the disclose very thing we don't know, but it really did some very negative thing. I don't know in the future whether someone will be detained and arrested because of very sensitive secret news. So we don't know that. And very important, WikiLeaks is also the same story of the fantasy about the internet company can keep secret and the privacy. Basically, it is a fantasy. WikiLeaks at the very beginning said, we have a cooperation with the New York Times, Guardians, we protect the names. But WikiLeaks just opened an era that nobody eventually can't keep the secret. It's the beginning of a new era. From now on, if you talk to any official guys or journalists or diplomats, Wikileaks should be the word in your mind. Eventually, everything you are telling will make public, will be read by everyone. If you can get used to this atmosphere, that totally crazy openness atmosphere, that will say you have the right, you have the ability to live in the new era. Without that, whatever your individual or your company or your corporation or your government, if you don't trust, if you still trust, secret can be kept as a secret. I think you will miss the story of Wikileaks. More importantly, how to keep the secret, keep the plot in the openness, in the non-secrecy way. That's the more important. I think Chinese philosophy can offer a lot about how to keep secret in the open way.
Good. So I'll have two very short comments, if you don't mind. Before I get into WikiLeaks, I also was struck by what you said, comparing what I said about authoritarian states to democracies, that many of the similar processes of disengagement from politics happen here when people think that by signing a petition, they're actually making social change. You know, I was amazed here in Ferrara. I was asked to sign something 3 times on the street, as if, you know, my signature of a foreigner to any petition would make much of a difference. But, you know, I politely declined without having to explain the whole theory, and they were very shocked. But, you know, my experience of talking to geeks and people who really believe that we are at the edge of a new era and that the internet will transform anything and everything it touches, they seem to believe that politics and political life is very much like Wikipedia. So, you know, you can come, edit a comma out of an article, then disappear for 2 months, then someone else will come, add another comma, and after 5 years you have an article. Right? And that's the whole fascination with crowdsourcing and how you can actually have so many people involved in this new political processes. But this is not how political life works, in part because you are often fighting existing incumbent power structures who don't care about your commas, but who have a lot of resources to hire paid staff who will then go and alter this Wikipedia article on a daily basis. And if you don't realize that, you just risk completely taking the wrong steps in trying to challenge power. And this is what puzzles me so much. So what have we learned and achieved to do with the internet? We know how to mobilize people, right? We know how to announce a meeting and tell them, please, everyone come here, and we'll see what happens next. But you have to draw a distinction between organizing and mobilizing. I mean, mobilizing is easy. Organizing, having a strategic agenda, a strategic purpose, you know, more than a 1 day or 1 week horizon is much more complicated. And here you can actually look at the Arab Spring as a complete failure of social media, right? Where, yes, they managed to topple Mubarak, but unless the same democratic circles manage to cement their result and their victory in elections, that victory is not as momentous as it seems. And this is where I think a lot of people who are excited about the internet tend to occupy some wonderland. And instead of going and fighting in the political parties, elections, using the internet to have a strategic plan, they just think, well, we'll just run a blog or we'll start an NGO. I mean, look at what Wael Ghonim did, the Egyptian guy who started that Facebook group. I mean, instead of saying, I'll go and join the Egyptian parliament or we'll start a political movement, he said, I'll start an NGO and we'll fight and we'll work on fighting poverty with technology. I mean, this is a laudable goal, but to me, this seems like a luxury. It's something that you do 20 years after the revolution, not 2 months after, where the situation is so uncertain. So this is what puzzles me so much. I mean, Angela Davis, who normally I wouldn't quote on any stage, who, you know, as you know, is a prominent communist organizer in America, she made a very good comparison, linking this new fascination with internet-driven mobilization to junk food. And that's more or less what it is. It's very easy to do. You can do it very cheaply. It satisfies your intellectual and psychological desire and ambitions very fast. I'm not sure that it's very nutritious as far as democracy is concerned, right? And this is something that we need to tackle on a much deeper intellectual level, and not just think that as long as we let people ways to contribute, they will come contribute, and then it will somehow topple the existing power structures. With regards to WikiLeaks, I think that it's a very sad story. In theory, I think the arrangement they worked out in the middle of their existence, where they would work with existing media, where existing media will lend the expertise to WikiLeaks, and they will vet all the documents and remove the names of all informants, that theory was perfect. You know, I think I defended WikiLeaks' right to publish, even though I thought that the consequences of that decision may be completely out of hand. But I thought, yes, they had the right to publish those documents. They didn't hack any networks to get those documents. They obtained them. Those documents mattered from a public interest perspective. And provided they would take good care of editing out all the information, they should have gone and published it, right? And I think they did work out the sensible agreement. The problem is that I think Assange has underestimated his enemies, and he underestimated his own rather noxious persona and the kind of trouble that many of his partners have in working with him. All of that was not fully visible to him, and as a result, he thought that he would be able to continue WikiLeaks, the project, indefinitely. You know, back in January, I made the argument, I published it, I gave a big talk in London saying that WikiLeaks is dead. There is nothing that will come out of WikiLeaks because the enemies are so powerful. And the moment you start submitting documents again, you'll be flooded with fake documents that will be uploaded for the sake of embarrassing WikiLeaks. Your credit cards will still be blocked. Your supporters will be monitored by NSA and CIA. You will not be able to do what you have been doing. Instead, what Assange should have done, but he didn't, was to completely shut down the project and emerge as a leader of this new political movement that fights for internet freedom. That would have been a perfect position for him, and he would be able to channel all this useful energy and excitement of these hacker groups like Anonymous and LulzSec and many others towards political struggle, towards causes and goals that would actually transform the internet landscape. Instead, he lingered on. He didn't relaunch WikiLeaks. He still hesitates about what he wants to do. Anonymous and LulzSec, in the meantime, completely got out of hand, attacking anyone who they want, have very little, Assange has no oversight about them whatsoever, and we are in a very tricky situation where essentially the choice for groups like Anonymous at this point is to become the terrorists of the virtual era or embrace political fighting, campaigning, and working on issues in ways that will not necessarily be illegal. And I think Assange had a huge role to play as the spiritual leader to this problem, to this movement, and he didn't play it. He surrendered responsibility, he didn't do it, and I think it's a very sad development.
A questo punto forse inviteremo chi vuole a fare delle domande ai nostri ospiti per rompere il ghiaccio. Tra l'altro c'è Marco Agosti che non vedo, ma Marco Agosti è il Media and Portal Director di Tiscali, diciamo che partecipa delle cose che facciamo qui a Ferrara e che aveva una prima domanda da fare ai nostri ospiti. Non vedo Marco. E poi chi vuole, appunto, naturalmente è benvenuto.
Dunque io ho una domanda per Michael. Vorrei portare l'attenzione al cittadino, cioè al netizen. Abbiamo parlato di 500 milioni di navigatori, abbiamo parlato di 200 milioni di microbloggers. Vorrei capire rispetto alle informazioni che hanno queste persone riguardo la privacy, riguardo la loro reputation, dove trovino le informazioni, se sia il governo, se sia chi gestisce le piattaforme, o se esistono degli spazi liberi, diciamo per quanto possibile, all'interno delle piattaforme, dove esista uno scambio, dove le persone possano acquisire quella consapevolezza che poi è la chiave, secondo me, per la cittadinanza attiva. Quindi il cittadino in Cina, il cittadino della rete, dove prende le informazioni, dove acquisisce il know-how per gestire se stesso come componente della rete.
To understand the Chinese microblog, we just have to have the two data. First is 500 million internet user. The second is we have the Chinese microblogging services. We have 200 million. And also the second very important thing to understand the platform of the microblogging in China is they have their very strict censorship system in the server. They have a different level. It's not only a one call, like he said, a call from the Politburo. I think Politburo didn't have a phone call. Don't need to do that. But the phone call from the upside, or they also have the keyword system that, for example, you can't type. For example, if you want to treat democracy, I think it will automatically to some kind of delayed pool with seconds and minutes after human being to review. And also they have their own the inside sensor about for example, in one famous company, Sina.com, they have 2,000 inside sensor to manage and control the microblogging services. And also very important, they use the data mining to identify the potential meetup and the protest, and even the social networking relationship between the sensitive piece of peoples. So that's the general picture. But even this picture a little bit like 1984. It's like use the technology to do authoritarian, very clever control 2.0 or censorship 2.0. Still, I support Chinese domestically microblogging because that's very important. The bright side of microblogging in China can give Chinese to practice their freedom of speech and the citizenship overweight the consequence that Chinese government utilize the technology to control the social media and individual data. Because it's a little bit like a competition. You know, only one hand, because of internet and new technology, Chinese netizens get more and more spaces to express yourself. Because we lack of the freedom of speech, the traditional media is not good. In Italy, in United States, mainstream media like this media, International, is it right? The magazine we give us. Traditional media in Italy is the main cause, right? But the internet, like Twitter, is the dessert, right? But Chinese, we have no main cause. So when internet, the microblogging become a national platform of opinions, it became main cause. Internet became main cause in China. Internet now become the #1 source for the Chinese young people, and not only young, but for the Chinese citizens to get information, more correct information. It is becoming the main cause. It really changed something because we lack of national media. So if your country have no national media, that means there is no public sphere in the nationwide. You can only have a columnist in a province. You cannot have an international, you can have a nationwide famous columnist. But internet give Chinese a first public sphere in a national way. So now, a guy in the Canton can have a very big influence in Beijing. A peasant in Yunnan province, a very remote province, he can petition on the internet, let the Beijing media and the Beijing officers know, which is very important. The momentum is changing something, the political atmosphere. Chinese is not only one big country. Chinese is a central province structure, a little bit like a federal state. Microblogging is threatening the local government. They hate, local government really hate microblogging. The attitude of central government to the microblogging is very complicated. They don't think it is a, so I do not think China will shut down the microblog. Even they have the consequence of the microblogging is very much to the regime, because central government also need to know nationwide public opinion about their policy. And also they want to know the local corruption. They want to control the local. So internet in China, like the traditional media, become not only a platform of appealing, but also become a public opinion collector, but also become a petition system. Peasant in a remote province now not go to Beijing to petition for the injustice case. They petition on microblog. It is very new way, and it is a very safe way for the central government. Because if thousands of peasants go to Beijing to petition to the upper government, maybe have the risk of the square effect of the revolution, right? 1,000 people just stand in the Tiananmen Square. Nobody know what will happen. But if the petition only go online in the microblogging, it's the same way to go to Beijing, but without risking the central government of any revolution. So eventually, central government will have their policy to utilize the microblogging, so little bit as a controller of the local government, and also public opinion collector for the people's will, and a little bit adjust their national policy, but without threat the regime. But of course, I will say, in this case, even it is utilized by central government, but microblogging is definitely an enemy of the local corrupt officials. So in this way, I said, Chinese can get much better result from the microblogging. So even it is self-censored and censorship, I support Chinese microblogging.
Scusa, ho rubato il turno a un altro ragazzo. Ok. Io faccio parte di un comitato locale nel nord dell'Italia che sta lottando contro un partito politico xenofobo. Hanno organizzato
L'applauso è per la capacità descrittiva buona per l'ospite straniero.
Sì. La settimana scorsa hanno organizzato, 2 settimane fa, una gara ciclistica chiamata con il nome di un paese immaginario che loro a cui vogliono dare l'indipendenza. Non voglio far nomi di quale sia questo. Noi abbiamo avuto parecchi problemi. Voi parlate a livello nazionale di come vengano chiusi i server, di come venga gestita l'informazione, di come venga racchiuso questo. Noi ci troviamo che quando ci siamo trovati la sera a festeggiare la buona riuscita di questo, ci è arrivata la polizia e ci ha chiuso il locale. Ci siamo trovati che la settimana dopo, quando ci siamo ritrovati per la riunione, sono venuti e ci hanno dato una multa perché il locale non era a norma di varie cose. Questo in 2 locali diversi. Ci ritroviamo adesso che quando stiamo facendo le riunioni dobbiamo farle senza telefono, dobbiamo metterci d'accordo a voce e non possiamo assolutamente scrivere niente sull'internet. Quando abbiamo messo su internet e pubblicato qualcosa, c'è sempre venuta fuori la polizia in assetto, non so come tradurlo, però antisommossa, ci siamo sempre trovati con molta più polizia di quanti siano i manifestanti e ci siamo trovati i media tradizionali a descriverci come dei sovvertitori, come dei beceri comunisti o con altri epiteti non troppo simpatici. Io volevo chiedere due cose nella vostra esperienza di blogger e di studioso del web. Come avere credibilità come movimento, nel senso come ottenere un minimo di credibilità da quello che è il pubblico, perché anche il pubblico di internet crede di più ai media tradizionali rispetto a quello che la gente vede coi propri occhi. E seconda cosa, come utilizzare le risorse della rete di amplificazione del pubblico, di amplificazione del share of voice e tutto in un contesto così controllato anche a livello locale. Non parliamo di livello nazionale o di livello di stati, come si dice, autoritari come i vostri. Volevo un piccolo commento da parte sia di Michael sia di Evgeny. Grazie.
Well, my answer will not be very optimistic, as you probably could have imagined. I think it's nice to expect that the internet will give you all those options and will make you more visible and will help you reach more people. But I think you shouldn't assume that by default, and that's part of my message, that we have, in a sense, oversold the unique capacities of this new network public sphere, that our expectations, in a sense, from the very beginning were way too high. So when Michael talks about ways in which this new public sphere can be used to challenge authority and the existing apparatchiks and whatnot, I mean, look, you also have to be aware of the fact that these people are getting smarter. They're hiring their own bloggers and their own commentators who not just censor things, who actually go online, engage in debate, and present themselves as genuine voices of the public, not as people working for the government. So the relationship between the ability to spread propaganda and the effectiveness of propaganda and the new kind of media platforms that have emerged, that relationship hasn't been explored so far. Most people, by default, assume that somehow these new spaces, because they are decentralized, would not be amenable to the creation and dissemination of propaganda. I hold the opposite view. I think that there is nothing inherent about these spaces that somehow makes them less likely to be places of spreading propaganda. It's just that the methods will need to change. And you will need to learn much more from corporations. I mean, look at the people. I can't speak about Italy. I can speak about the United States. Corporations are the ones who've mastered the art of social media. They know how to push their brands. They know how to actually make it seem as if it's not corporations pushing their brands, but actual real Twitter and Facebook users expressing their fascination with a detergent or a TV station or whatever, right? And all of that seems genuine, and slowly, method by method, lesson by lesson, the same tricks end up in the political sphere, where essentially corporations drive and hone the development of such methods. Political players in the West then learn how to adapt them during election cycles. And most bizarrely, the same methods then migrate to authoritarian states, where, you know, where do you think the Chinese officials, the Russian officials, learn all of their propaganda tricks? They learn them from Western PR and marketing textbooks. You have Western marketing and PR executives who work on campaigns in the West, go and deliver seminars and lectures in China, Moscow, and elsewhere, right? So we have to be very careful because, look, it's not that the authoritarian governments are so smart that they have managed to tame the internet. They've learned many of the lessons from their Western counterparts, both in terms of censorship and in terms of propaganda. So that's the pessimistic side of my answer. The optimistic side is that the rules are not predetermined, and there is no end to innovation in this space, right? And you can be much more funnier and ironic and cynical in your comments than the other side, because in most cases, the other side lacks creativity. Right? And they lack the appeal to the young people. So while it takes a lot of effort to keep a sustained message, appeal to a long audience, a large audience for a long time, it is possible to have these momentous outbursts where a single message gets picked up, not because you planned it, but because the online culture is receptive to it. And that's the whole idea of memes that we see online where, pictures of cats that otherwise are not remarkable and not worthy of display anywhere, let alone a museum, suddenly got the attention of millions of people, and they resonate. I mean, there is definitely ways to learn from the success, even of the silliest possible anecdotes and examples of the internet. Right? There are ways in which you can bypass these official channels if they are increasingly being flooded with propaganda. It's just that you have to be attentive and be prepared to learn from industries and fields that are not necessarily political. It may be crazy to think that there is something you can learn from people who blog about cats, but I wouldn't give up necessarily on that corner of the web.
I think to build up your own course, even in this very decentralized digital world, is also to keep it in mind. Internet is only a media, it is a medium of the news or of the information. It is not about really new information. It's just a new medium of the information. So that's why the New York Times and this very famous magazine, the Italian I can't speak, this very famous magazine can use this kind of internet things, invited bloggers to involve it, because they are good at as the traditional way of their publicity, of their news reporting. It's almost the same technology when you use it in a social media way, but a little bit changed. First, I want to say they didn't change the agenda setting. Why people really want to read this blog, but not that blog? Because this blog is like gave this information. We are living in a really decentralized information world. The information like the sea, oceans, and too many information. So we really want to lead some expert bloggers who only talk about very deep on a particularly field about one thing. You don't need to know everything, because it's knowing everything word. You want to know, some blogger know everything about one thing. So that's the agenda setting. So why you can build up agenda settings? Because I was a tradition journalist. I was the war reporter in 2003 in Baghdad, and I work for New York Times. So basically, I'm a tradition journalist. But also very easy for me to do in the internet age, because the same things agenda setting. I know what is people really want to know in the digital world. But yes, agenda setting didn't change at all. So just I mentioned by him, the Chinese official propaganda, the officials and the publicity officials, they trained in the J school. Because the same thing. So if you want to be famous and you keep your course to well known in the internet age, you should offer the readers the special things, the expert things, the things you can't see as a twittering everywhere. The only thing, so more you Pacific in one position, the more influence you can get. Because this guy is just to criticize the fantasy of the internet. He's just famous about that. I know more, so I'm less famous than him.
My expertise on art is not known in China.
So I think that means so you should focus on the one thing. But also something changed. For example, most important change is about people want to know now. It doesn't need to waiting for the weekend to read newspaper or for the next morning to know the thing happened. They want to know now. So if you satisfy the people to know as soon as possible this trend, you can win. You can beat the traditional media. So that's why live tweeting, even it's not very complicated, but it's always beating news reporting because people want to know more. After I read all live tweeting about conference, I almost don't want to read the articles tomorrow morning. No, I already know live tweeting. And also very important change. If you can't describe one theory in 140 characters or two sentences, you just forget about it. because people have no time to read longer than 140 characters. So that really,
The length of my next book.
oh yes. So that's the new era. So you should first hit the point at the very beginning. You can't wait for some of the long-form journalism. Yes, long-journal you still have. New Yorkers still can share, but it's in weekend. But for the everyday blogging, I need you first, at the very beginning, hit the point within the 140 character, the headline. That's very new, fundamentally changed. Some traditional media didn't get the news. And also, the third one I want to remind you, people hate spam. Don't tweet spam. Sorry, it's not spam. Don't tweet too often. For example, if a newspaper, they will tweet more than 10 tweets a day, I will forget to subscribe to that. Because in this new age, the concentration is a resources. It's limited. So you should beat the other through your resources, through your thing you can offer, your energy of the language style, but keep in mind, you are competed with other tweeters and bloggers. So just know we are competing with the readers' concentration. That's very important. That's a fundamentally new change.
Allora, visto che Evgeny ha annunciato il suo prossimo libro, il cui sottotitolo dell'edizione inglese sarà The Quick Side of the Internet, evidentemente, e siccome è quasi l'una, diciamo, se mi promettete tutti quanti molta rapidità e tu vuoi ancora fare quella domanda, facciamo l'ultima domanda e poi chiudiamo.
Allora, io avrei una domanda che potrebbe essere vista da due punti di vista differenti, che comunque sono legati fra di loro. Allora, come si diceva prima, appunto la rivoluzione deve essere già nella testa delle persone affinché uno strumento, quale possa essere Twitter o un social media qualsiasi, possa essere di aiuto appunto alla rivoluzione stessa, quindi come si parlava della Tunisia in questo caso. Però potrebbe darsi che questi social media possano essere già di loro uno strumento per velocizzare, ad esempio, i dissensi all'interno di una popolazione affinché appunto escano fuori apertamente in maniera più rapida. E una cosa secondo me legata anche a questo aspetto può essere derivata da una lettura che ho avuto io di un libro di sociologia in cui si diceva che un messaggio, per poter essere veicolato in maniera efficace fra le masse, quindi fra la folla, deve avere sostanzialmente tre componenti: la ripetizione, l'affermazione e il contagio. Queste sono cose che i social media fanno in maniera molto efficace, quindi si ripetono sempre le stesse cose, si affermano senza stare a spiegare molto e soprattutto avviene un contagio con i vari like, plus one, eccetera, eccetera. Però manca una componente fondamentale in tutto questo, ma manca il leader sostanzialmente, quello che si fa carico di prendere questi dissensi popolari e lo porti avanti. Quindi anche collegandomi alla domanda precedente dello speed up dei dissensi, ma è proprio vero che sia questo il problema o semplicemente la mancanza di un leader che prenda carico di tutti i dissensi popolari e li porti avanti in maniera appunto più ragionata, quindi politica?
I'll start if you don't mind. So, with regards to your initial premise, I think there is definitely a way in which social media can speed up the rejection of the regime or the embrace of the revolution. But you have to understand that it doesn't only work one way, that the traffic can very easily be in the other direction. What we saw in Iran in 2009 was that, yes, at the beginning, there was quite a lot of discussion on Twitter and social media about democracy, the revolution, ways to gather and organize. But as the government began the crackdown, the tone of the messages changed. The tone of the messages suddenly was about how bloody the crackdown is, how difficult and challenging it is to walk through Tehran, and how likely it is that you'll get arrested and beaten up, as people were already shot in the streets and put in prison. So you shouldn't underestimate the ways in which social media and these new channels of communication can also erode the common structure, because the violence and the brutality of a revolution, and they by default are bloody and repressive in most cases, that it can also have a very dampening effect on the people's ability to organize and gather. So the transmission of fear works as well on social media as the transmission of, brave feelings, or you name it. With regards to the absence of leaders, there are also here, we need to be very careful. Some people look at Tunisia and Egypt and claim that those are leadership revolutions as far as social media is concerned. And, the leaders who have led them are shy people who kind of stay in the background, and they are happy with that narrative. I'm not sure that that's the actual narrative. I mean, if you look at the kind of strategic planning that went into preparing the next generation of cyber activists in Tunisia or in Egypt, you clearly see leadership figures. You see people running NGOs, you see top bloggers getting training and organizing all sorts of, and building tools that will circumvent censorship. You have clear leadership figures who may not necessarily be visible, but who are still there, administering Facebook groups, making sure that the websites are unblocked, making sure that people have the software tools. So the fact that we do not see the leaders may speak more about us than the actual situation. So we have to be very careful to have the right lens. It may be that we are looking in the wrong places, that leaders are there, they're just hiding for reasons of their own. And the other point is that if you do buy into the premise that these revolutions are leaderless, once the revolution is over, or once the protests are over and the old regime has been discharged, this is where the problems start. And I think this is where the problems start in Tunisia and Egypt. The lack of a revolutionary leadership and the lack of well-organized party structure does make it very difficult to fight against the previous remnants of the regime, or against other people with other agendas that are not conducive for democracy. And you cannot just fight your way through this problem with social media and Twitter and Facebook. You do need people to make decisions, and you do need people to actually distribute resources. And my last comment here is that with all the excitement about the Arab Spring, the countries we'll talk about are still, Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya. Partly. Why not look at Bahrain, where you had more or less the same starting conditions? You had, people jumping on Facebook to organize protests and to oppose government structures. And the opposition, the traditional organized Bahraini opposition, was kind of skeptical of this new useful movement, thinking that they would not be able to topple the government and they would waste a wonderful opportunity that may come by later. So what happened is that the government more or less managed to suppress the uprising. There was no sustained leadership challenge to the Bahraini government. Yes, we saw plenty of activity on Facebook and outside, but the absence of such organized oppositional networks may actually be responsible for the failure of the revolution in Bahrain. So all I'm saying is that you have to be very careful not to draw conclusions and inferences only from places where social media works. There are plenty of cases in the Middle East and elsewhere where, yes, people have started with the same premises and the same beliefs, and it didn't work out. And I'm not saying that it didn't work out only because of social media. Of course, political, social, and cultural context is crucial, but you have to look at the failures as well. If you just look at successes, you'll get a completely wrong picture of the role that the internet plays.
I think it's very important to say that the internet is a new technology, but so it's changing people, not only the protesters, but also the government. So they're changing even change the way of the game, the way of the game, changing the game. So I'm a little bit more optimistic about that. Yes, the protesters, sometimes the overconfidence is about the Tunisia and Egypt, this way of new change, but also even the after the revolution in Egypt, the old establishment that revive and come back with the their resources. But I would say something eventually totally changed inside. Because still, now the citizens can have a new technology, counter technology they can protest again. Because new environment occurs. So in China, it's the same thing. Yes, I think the Chinese government is utilized the microblogging more like a 1984 way. But also, it totally changed the mindset, not only the citizen, but also the officials. Just to keep in mind, the next generation, next 10 years official, they are all bloggers. They are all netizens. Because we are already about 500 million bloggers, including officials. So next, the young officials, whatever is democratic or communists, they are bloggers. So that fundamentally changed the way they're thinking about the world. I do think internet is a new thing, but it's not a revolution. But it is revolutionary. People should make very sophisticated research about what really changed. About leadership, I just want very short thing. Leadership, yes. The social media leadership, a little bit of problem because it decentralized leadership. But it's also good. Something good for the country like China. Because you have the party list. You have the single leader. So if I want to crack down the opposition, I don't know how to arrest. Because
they don't seem to have a problem with arresting famous bloggers in China.
How to arrest? Yes, of course, they arrest not all. But because if you arrest the new leaders will come. That's the new situation come. That's always decentralized leadership can create more leaders by their own. It's not that way. They have the pros and the cons. The cons is, of course, the bad side because without a single strong leadership, you cannot to have a plot, to have a campaign, yes. But also because of kind of openness and the decentralized leadership, it will make the opposition movement longer and healthy because everything, even from the very beginning, is in the public. It's not like a Lenin, a communist. You know, communists have a very good idea, but at the very beginning, the party itself is a secret party. A secret party can't give you an openness. That's the communists tell us. So if the social media era opposition movement, at the very beginning, everything is in the public, I think maybe in the future, it can give a different scenario of which we feared in the 1970s, 1930s, and then the 40s when communists.
So you do support Wikileaks after all?
Why isn't that? No.
Dibattito, però diciamo anche l'idea di concluderlo citando il fatto che il comunismo tutto sommato era una buona idea, ma abbiamo avuto dei problemi nell'attuazione. Diciamo che, come sapete, è un vecchio cliché piuttosto abusato, ma non voglio assolutamente attribuire a Michael, stavo forzando. Vi ringrazio molto. Segnalo che il libro di Evgeny esce in Italia per Codice Edizioni alla fine del mese, si chiama L'ingenuità di Internet, l'ingenuità della rete. Ringrazio molto Michael Anti, ringrazio molto Evgeny Morozov, ringrazio molto tutti voi e Internazionale, ci vediamo in giro.